Skyfall equals RK equals Part 3 equals RK equals KDYHQ Press Conference Auditorium. Jagged pieces of durasteel rained all over the room, scything through people as if they were wheat ready for harvest. Accurate blast of fire burned through stunned guard as cloaked figures poured out of the shattered transport. Zash moved faster than a human had any right to and raised barrier that protected her and Anara from the initial onslaught. She pushed the stunned woman back just as Perion rushed their position. Now that the Jedi Master was no longer hiding, his presence burned brightly, yet black tendrils spread all over his aura like demented vines. If the situation wasn't so dangerous, Zash would be laughing. Jared Perion, one of the best if not the best the Order once had, was busy falling to the dark side. She only hoped that his condition would give her an edge so she would live and could rub it into his face. Zash vaulted back and wrenched the force, and with it the floor itself. The thick sheet of durasteel buckled and broke under her command, with a huge section flying right at the Jedi. Perion barely slowed down to shatter it, which bowed her enough time to bring down the ceiling upon his head along with multiple desks, cabinets and office workers. More screams and whimpers of pain rose, only to be drowned by the shriek of alarms and blast of fire. Finding herself with a moment of respite, Zash turned her head towards Anara, who had landed near a pair of dazed guards. "Run, you fools," she snapped at them and gave them a telekinetic shove that made the men stumble through the closest exit, while Kuat skidded over the metal floor. That was all the time Zash had to spare, because Perion chose that moment to erupt through the hole in the floor where the collapsed ceiling shoved him into. A rain of debris preceded him, thrown with enough speed to approach the acceleration a rail gun could have given them. The Sith countered with a telekinetic barrier, and the resulting collision was enough to shatter the incoming projectiles, while those that missed her shredded all the furniture and people unlucky to stand behind her. Perion vaulted her way, surrounded by a bright, almost blinding cloak made of the Force itself. Instead of facing him head-on, Zash tapped her foot on the floor, a gesture that helped her control her power more precisely, and the metal below her feet collapsed. The moment she landed on the floor below, the ground shattered again, letting her get further away from the Jedi. Perion wasted no time and jumped after her. When he entered the new hole, Zash was already 3 floors down, falling towards the 4th, surrounded by a constellation of floating metal debris. The moment Perion came into view, she sent a torrent of crackling lighting at him, one that she channeled through the metal fragments to form a net of Sith lighting and melting metal that snapped around Jared's form. Instead of trapping and frying him, the attack merely closed around a tangible aura caused by the amount of Force energy he was using to enhance and protect himself. Molten metal splashed over a form-fitting shield of light, lighting harmlessly crackled and arced over his form, only to discharge itself through the holes in the floors he fell through, thus tearing large chunks off them. When Zash reached the next floor and found herself within a large, mostly open office space, instead of breaking through it and going further down, she rolled away. Moments later, Perion arrived, followed by a shower of sparkling and smoking debris that rained upon his armored form to no effect. His 2 lightsabers hummed ominously, held in a low guard. The moment his feet touched the ground, the Jedi charged, all the while Zash threw metal and wooden desks alike at him. She used that attack as a distraction to hide the real danger, a spear forged from the dark side itself that she hurled at him just after throwing yet another desk. The Jedi Master used his will alone to batter aside a pair of objects that flew at him from both sides, intent on squashing him, and as he ran at the Sith he cut through a desk thrown his way. The 2 pieces bounced off the Force surrounding him, and he jumped, vaulting over another piece of furniture, busy shattering itself where he just stood. He lightly landed at another desk thrown at him while still in midair and jumped off it, heading straight at Zash. He rolled over the next one as a warning flared through the Force. Jared could feel a build-up of dark side energy from where Zash was still hidden by a wall of floating furniture, but that didn't deter him nor slowed him down. He crossed his lightsabers, a mental aid to more easily craft a telekinetic battering ram in front of him, one which he shoved forward with his next step. His will broke apart the furniture shielding the Sith, and as she shielded herself from the onslaught, shaved off shards of metal, sparkling circuitry, broken pieces of metal and shattered glass flew in every direction as if picked up by a hurricane. The resulting storm was more than enough to ground an unprotected being to the bone. Even the metal floor and ceiling didn't emerge unscratched. The flying debris left jagged gorges before the chaos ended, and through the large room in twilight lit up only by 3 lightsabers, 2 azure ones and 1 crimson. Dust burned and sparkled when caught on the blades, and soon the room slowly began to glow from the force surrounding Parian. The increasing brightness on his side only served to deepen the shadows thrown by Zash, which along with the dust appeared to be moving until they engulfed the Sith, hiding her from sight but not the Jedi's senses. The light also revealed that Zash's attack missed, and the proof was the collapsing firewall that was slowly being corrupted and eaten by dark side energies. Such passion. Zash crooned. The light engulfing Parian had darker undertones. There were shadows flickering within it. "It's really wasted on you." She smiled. The shadows flickering within Parian's aura became deeper. The glow surrounding him turned sinister, cruel. "I must thank you, you know. If it wasn't for you, Master Parian, none of this would be possible." She gave him a tiny curtsy. The Jedi tilted his head to the side as if debating something with himself, then without uttering a word, charged. The force pulsed within and around him, and with a single pulse he appeared in front of Zash, swinging. The dust blew behind him and the floor buckled and cracked from his passing. Lightsabers hissed and cracked with releasing energy as they met, and the Sith found herself thrown back from the power and ferocity behind the attack. Another crack of displaced air echoed as Parian hurled himself at her, and all she could do was backpedal and frantically defend herself. RK equals Part 3 RK equals KDYHQ. The sound of tortured metal shrieked down a long, well-lit corridor, and then, a durasteel wall cracked, bulged and then shattered when a dusty form slammed through it, and only stopped when it crashed into the far wall. Zash fell on the ground, her silk-covered knee scrapping painfully on the floor. She was still alive, at one piece even, and that was all that was going for her. While Parian was unbalanced, which was obvious to everyone with the eyes to see, the bastard was still a powerhouse who could batter through everything she could throw at him and didn't give her time for anything too fancy. Plain Arupsh, murder the Criff of the bloody Jedi herself, thus went out of the airlock. Plan Besh, rely on local forces for a distraction enough to either get away or wound him to even the odds thus far didn't work. The few Quati security they passed by during their engagement so far died without being able to even inconvenience Parian. The rest were likely too busy dealing with his backup, whatever plan he had, and getting Inara out of the area intact. Thus Zash had to go outside where backup could reach her more easily, not to mention could bring to bear heavier weapons. That unfortunately was a bit easier said than done. She was barely up on her feet when a large chunk of metal torn from the ceiling finished demolishing the far wall of the corridor. She had to halt it with the force, then dive away when Parian charged through it, blasting it apart. A hastily raised telekinetic barrier took the brunt of the debris, however a few chunks managed to get through and slammed into her with bruising force. Zash spat a curse and tore the floor below her feet with a thought, then propelled it along with herself down the corridor and away from the crazy Jedi. She was beginning to reconsider her choice of attire. There was something to be said about being clad in nice heavy armor most of the time, even if it was damn uncomfortable and usually plain bloody ugly. A pulse came through the force and Parian appeared close, almost reaching her with his lightsabers. He did miss, however, and for his troubles Zash tore the surrounding walls along with the ceiling and did her best to squash him like a tin can. Another pulse and the sphere of twisted durasteel that would have killed or at least contained a lesser opponent exploded like an oversized fragmentation grenade that tore that whole part of the building apart. The glow surrounding Parian increased, and he came right after Zash, preceded by a murderous whirlwind of twisting debris. The Sith sensed a relatively large concentration of people nearby, and when she was close enough halted her flight. She tore the floor in front of Parian, and when he jumped tore the right wall and hurled it at him, thus conveniently opening her a way to said people. It was time to see if the time-honored practice of placing people in danger would work on him. At worst, Their deaths would make for even better propaganda to keep the Jedi's collective coffin nicely sealed for posterity. Arcade equals Star Dreadnought Defender, High Orbit, Kuat. The gargantuan ship burst into real space above her homeworld. Immediately became clear that despite Zash's cry for help through the Force, whatever was happening down on the surface hadn't been noticed by the Quati SDF. A flurry of challenges and demands bombarded the ship, and the captain had to do some fast talking to confirm that Defender hadn't been taken by the Sis while no one was looking and about to lay waste to Kuat. I got all that by being patched in the ship's command net despite my current location, in one of the huge hangar bays standing next to an orbital insertion pod along with a whole battalion of Quati Marines. It took precious time to get confirmation that there was in fact a disturbance at KDY's HQ planetside, even longer for clearance to make an uncontested orbital drop, time I spent monitoring my connection with Zash. I could sense she was hard-pressed, and no wonder why. Perian was down there and he wasn't bothering to hide himself any longer, on the contrary. I could clearly sense him all the way from orbit and regretted that taking him out along with a few thousand square kilometers of surrounding city wouldn't be something I could get away with. General, we just intercepted distress calls, multiple terrorist strikes all over the planet. We've got permission to insert troops and secure critical facilities and personnel. The captain informed me. I was already securely sealed within my pod along with the rest of the battalion. The Defender rotated a bit until the hangar pointed in the general direction of KDY's HQ. A green light blinked within my pod, and then extreme acceleration slammed into me despite the inertial dampening system. In a blink I was launched out of the ship, and soon my pod hit the atmosphere. With no defenses to contend with, the ride down was smoother than it could have been, and as importantly, there was no jamming or need to keep the net down to avoid pinpointing the locations of real pods instead of decoys, which would have made the bulk of those launched in a contested insertion. That allowed me to gain a very rough understanding of the situation in no small part thanks to the analysts and combat controllers safe aboard the Defender. There were 5 bombings and 4 attacks on quasi-security substations in the general area of KDY's HQ, with at least a dozen more confirmed all over the planet. And that was after multiple raids by security forces on suspected or confirmed BSN cells last night. In fact, that was what Anara Kuat's press conference was about, the same one that Perian crashed. Not for the first time I found myself missing more or less loyal and competent intelligence agency on my side. For all the troubles that Imperial intelligence put me into, they were worth their weight in any precious substance one might care to name and more. I felt the screams of horror of a lot of dying people followed by a tingle of apprehension. Something bloody just happened, potent enough to feel it. "Oh my God," someone gasped over the command channel, breaking the expected chatter of incoming intelligence. "General, be advised, a massive explosion just occurred on the KDY array. Homeworld Defense Command is activating Case Omega. Planetary shield will be coming online ASAP." Outraged chatter exploded all over the battalion net until the officers and NCOs managed to make everyone shut up and concentrate on the task at hand, something that I immediately tuned out. The first thing I did was check the altitude. We should already be below the planetary shield, though certainly not any theater ones yet. Using the data link between my armor, the pod and Defender, I called an image from the ship's sensors. A window opened on my HUD showing a tactical display. The Star Dreadnought was accelerating towards the array, which was blinking red, and a significant chunk of it was missing, with the jagged ends being surrounded with the warning signs for debris. Seeing that called some bad memories, of space stations bursting into fire, some falling from orbit, of orbital defenses ready to be turned upon Imperial planets by an insane Dark Council members. The effect of the array breaking up and hitting the surface before the planetary shields could initialize would be as bad if not worse than a brief but potent orbital bombardment. At the same time, what was happening, what I was seeing, it was an opportunity. Spin right, we would be able to blame it all on the Separatists and Perian, and it didn't matter if this was an enemy action or more unlikely an accident. I would bet a lot that this was a part of Perian's exit strategy, one that likely kicked off earlier than expected. Well, it didn't matter. If I had anything to say about it, he wasn't getting away no matter what he had up his sleeve. Soon, the pod came low enough and strategically placed explosives cracked it like an egg, letting me into free fall less than a kilometer above KDY-HQ. I could clearly see smoke coming from one side with emergency vehicles beginning to swarm the place, all the while people were streaming out either through emergency exits or after running to the nearest garage and getting aboard some kind of vehicle. Zash's position was easy to make even without our connection. She and Perian were like a beacons heading towards one corner of the building. Strike actual to all strike elements, primary target is nearing the western corner KDY-HQ. I placed a marker in the rough area where we were headed to and kicked on the anti-grav harness added to my armor for this mission. The deceleration was jerky and sudden and my free fall turned into controlled glide towards the building. I spared a moment to look up and saw half the battalion still streaking like falling stars above us. However, that wasn't what got my attention. A huge bright shock wave was slowly dissipating high above us, with its edge causing the atmosphere to ionize and creating northern lights. A ring of smoking debris slammed into the stratosphere and began burning, and above them I could clearly see the jagged edges of the broken orbital array. It was testament to the skill and paranoia of its designers that despite the grievous wound the rest of the structure appeared to remain intact and structurally sound. I hadn't even finished that thought when a flash of light caught the corner of my eye. I turned my head, the HUD helpfully zooming into a second, smaller explosion that tore into the array about 1,000 kilometers to the east of the first one. I didn't know if the rest of the array might be safe. However, a huge chunk of the array was now torn apart from the rest, and it was anyone's guess if the Quati fleet could prevent it from slamming into the ground. It was no surprise at all when shrill sirens began screaming all over the city just as the chatter over the battalion net spiked. Strike actual to all strike elements, change in plans. We neutralize the primary target, evacuate VIPs and get the hell out of here before the array can fall on our heads. I shook my head and turned my undivided attention to the task at hand. This was going to criffing suck. Godspeed, strike actual. Defender is moving in to intercept the broken piece of the array. We're launching all available craft to assist SAR. The shocked yet decisive voice of Defender's captain echoed in my helmet, and I wanted to pat myself on the back for sending Panka to sulk in his quarters before heading here. The last thing anyone needed was that fool falling apart during this mess. Interlude, a master and his apprentice. RK equals. Master, is the dark side evil? Arya asked. They stood on a recreation of Korriban made of memories, observing some questionable training her master had to undergo an eternity ago. Or just the Sith? Having second thoughts on what you want to be, apprentice? Just wondering. Is a storm evil? An earthquake? The Force has no concept of good or evil but what we assign it. The dark side. She is selfish, that's the best way to put it, I think. She doesn't care about what we deem moral. She is a force of nature and has the same regard for people. 5,000 years ago, the Jedi deceived the Old Republic into going to war with the ancient Sith Empire. The result was a genocide of the original Sith species and the near extinction to the Force adepts living in said empire. The few scattered survivors fled to the unknown region and for 1,000 years plotted their revenge because they knew beyond any shadow of a doubt that there could be no coexistence. The Jedi and Republic proved that fact. The result? It was the twisted empire built upon foundations of spite, rage and vengeance, all the while the Jedi who burned Korriban and 100 other worlds were hailed as heroes. How many of those Jedi do you think fell to the dark side for committing an unprovoked genocide? The Force is hypocritical then? Or perhaps historians? What would I find if I browsed the data net on Coruscant? Perhaps. Or perhaps intentions and belief matter as much as actions do when the Force is concerned. As for history, the Jedi and Old Republic won that war. They wrote the history that is widely available. And it would be as biased if not more than the accounts that survived the fall of the First Sith Empire. I've seen the Dark Council through your eyes, Master. I've seen what you've done in the name of power and survival. In the Empire those were the same thing. True enough, I guess. Back then, you might have been an angel compared to your peers, yet. Arya paused. I've seen you burn whole worlds, condemn species to genocide merely because pacifying them was too troublesome and it was more cheap to simply exterminate them and import imperial citizens and droid to make their worlds productive. Yet my peers then were so much worse. But nowadays? It all depends on where you stand. Even after Bothoi, there are billions upon billions who support and cheer my actions, with as many if not more decrying them. Not to mention all those who simply keep their heads down so they wouldn't gain my attention. It is a big galaxy with tens of thousands spacefaring species, even more cultures, and all of those have different morals, see good and evil in different light. The actions that makes me a monster to some, apprentice, are the same actions that cause others to respect and hail me as a hero. If you follow in my footsteps, you might have to become one too. That very well may be the case, Master. However, you offer me something that few would dare, the power to forge my own path, whatever that might be, even if it means embracing the dark side. RK equals Part 4 RK equals KDYHQ Kuat. Zash dashed through an armored door a moment before it could sealed and found herself at the back of a hallway packed with KDY personnel racing towards the closest evacuation points. Her very presence, sapped in the corrupting energies of the dark side, made everyone she approached push back and away from her path. The Sith ran within the crowd without even slowing down, while behind her the armored door cracked, twisted and then exploded like a gargantuan anti-personnel charge, with pieces of metal cutting through rows of packed people. A heartbeat later, Perian ran into the hallway, and if his handiwork disturbed him, he didn't let it slow him down at all. He followed Zash through the now panicking and screaming crowd, with the force surrounding him acting as a buffer that pushed or crushed anyone unlucky or slow enough to stand in his way. The Sith reached the evacuation point moments before the Jedi, and heedless of the people around her, brought the ceiling down behind her, crushing everyone unlucky enough to be in the area. She dove through the exit to land on a landing platform at the side of the building, and just in time too. Behind her the whole wall blew outwards, showering everything with pieces of metal, screaming people and corpses. A large chunk of durasteel slammed into a transport just lifting off and hurled it along with its human cargo to plunge 2 kilometers down to the surface. Moments later, 2 waiting air cars met the same fate before Perian crushed the engine compartment of a second transport. Only then did he jump on the platform to face Zash. A concentrated torrent of lighting met him in midair, only to be caught on his lightsabers. All the attack did was slow down his descent, and when he landed on the platform he flourished his blades, discharging the arching energy still contained upon them. 2 waves of crackling lighting seared the landing pad with enough force to crack it in places and drive off everything on it but the Sith. The moment his feet touched the ground, Perian was sprinting, propelled by both the Force and his armor. Blinding light surrounding his left saber, and when he was halfway to his prey he threw it on the heels of a mighty telekinetic push. Zash managed to counter the first attack, which pushed her only a couple of steps back, and she deflected the incoming saber too, using her own. When the blades touched, a searing flash of light blew up in the Sith's face, temporarily robbing her of her sight. Usually such a handicap wouldn't have really hurt her. However, then and there all she could sense from Perian was a huge pulsing sphere of light and dark force energy. Zash acted on instinct and still managed to parry his first slash. That didn't stop her from receiving a Force Enhancer's armored fist to the face, a punch she rolled with while solidifying a telekinetic barrier around herself. Light spots and stars danced in front of her eyes, which wasn't helped by the glow emanating from the damned Jedi. She lashed with her blade, felt resistance, then her defenses popped loudly and she was rolling away, barely avoiding a blazing lightsaber. There was no dodging a kick that cracked multiple ribs and drove the air out of her lungs. Perian delivered powerful overhead slash that Zash sensed coming in the last possible moment and desperately brought up her blade to parry. This was the worst possible fight for her, facing a master of the blade alone, in a place and time not of her choosing. The Jedi towered above her, and servo motors along with force-enhanced muscles pushed their locked blades closer and closer to her flesh. Zash glared at Perian and the dark side swirled around them. Lighting struck all over the landing pad as she unleashed an uncontrolled storm upon them both. A pillar of corrupted energy slammed into Parian with deafening rumble. It made him stumble, yet the force manifested around him managed to deflect or absorb the strike, while merely the radiating heat was enough to give Zash first-degree burns despite her own defenses. Another strike landed just behind the Jedi and made him stumble again, and this time the Sith was ready and broke the saber lock. She lashed with strength and speed born of desperation, while a third strike blasted them both. Parian's defense cracked and Zash's blade connected with his armor only for a shield to burn out, absorbing a lot of the blade's energy before her attack was over. There was a glowing gash left on Parian's chest plate, the force surrounding him solidified back into his odd shield, and he was ready to continue his attack. Zash, on the other hand, was blown back by the last lighting strike. It singed her and sent torrents of energy through her body. She landed in a smoking lump that twitched spasmodically. As if that wasn't enough, the lightsaber she deflected earlier came screaming back at her. She managed to concentrate enough through the pain racking her body to halt the incoming projectile and, acting on instinct, surround her body in a force barrier. It was too little, too late. Parian was upon her again, and when he slammed his lightsaber into her side, her defense was enough to slow it down but not stop it. Zash rolled away with every movement, making her bite off a scream. The burning blade caught her at the lower part of the chest, vaporizing flesh, ribs and ruining organs. A telekinetic pull jolted her to a stop, and this time there was no stopping her pained scream. Parian towered above her like an angel of death, and behind him the skies themselves burned and fell. RK equals Part 5 RK equals Landing Pad KDY HQ Kuat. This is what is to be Delkatar Vale, the Dark Lord of the Sith Vale, a general of the Grand Army of the Republic, Mandalore, a monster who set the whole galaxy afire and was hailed as a hero for it, for a second time. Ever since the day the Jedi murdered your wife, you had been living for this moment. You became a mask of sanity and reason within the Sith Empire so you would live long enough to savor your vengeance. You were among those who engineered the defeat of the Old Republic and a coup meant to reform the Sith Empire itself. You had shattered armies, broken fleets, burned whole worlds to make this possible. It was all for this moment. Everything you've been through ever since first taking breath in this galaxy had led to this point. Your armored form tears through the air, the stratosphere burns high above you as a country-sized chunk of space station slowly tumbles through space and begins to fall. You can feel the shock and terror of countless people echo through the Force, and all you could say is that this is a fitting background for your vengeance. And then, finally you lay your eyes upon Jared Parian's form and your world grounds to a halt. All the mask you've ever worn are stripped away. All pretenses, all justifications are gone. The dark side grants many gifts. You know this. You've taught this. Now, she retracts one of them and you're left floundering. The war doesn't matter anymore. The Jedi and Sith, even the two sides of the Force and their eternal conflict, are forgotten. The dark side, however, she hadn't forgotten you. It is this moment she has been patiently waiting for, a treachery 4,000 years in the making. If Parian falls here, by your hand, and you fall with him in the embrace of the dark side, there won't be a way back. The war, the real one, would be won, for there would be no one to stop you before it's too late, and the dark side would reign supreme. At this moment, when all you care about is vengeance, she betrays you. For one perfect moment of clarity, all lies you had ever told yourself to bury your conscience are stripped away, all pretenses are gone. You stand alone, gazing into the man you used to be, the soldier who sacrificed everything for a second chance, and finally understand that you've betrayed everything he stood for. Everything you ever stood for. You can see a perfect image of Ashara and know she would turn her gaze away in horror if she could see what you wreaked in her name, just before she picked up her sword to oppose you. You're alone, falling. Everything you've touched had been destroyed, either by the dark side herself or by the light that was supposed to represent all that was good in the galaxy. All because of you, the choices you made without a second thought. Veta, Ashara, Shark T. Bo-Katan. You remember them as they were before you crashed into their lives. The feathered touch of soft lips, fiery passion, the moments that made you feel alive and carefree, the moments of love that were gone. 3 of those women were already dead and damned, either because of you or by your own hands. Because when you could have done something different, when you could have thought more about them and done something to save them, you thought only about yourself. Bo-Katan. What are the odds you won't destroy her too? You're an unrepentant monster after all. You can't lie to yourself any longer. When you look at the mirror, you won't see Darth Vader. There won't be a corrupted and twisted version of yourself fallen to the dark side who you can blame. It's only you. This is the final trap of the dark side, what she wants. Your conscience is unbound and the horrors you've wreaked all over the galaxy are devouring your mind. You're alone with your demons when she offers you her dark embrace. She forgives you and more importantly she understands. She offers you a shoulder to cry upon, a mask called Darth Vader to hide behind from the galaxy you ravaged and more importantly, from yourself. This is how it feels to be Delcatar Vale. The only truth you have left is vengeance and the dark side eagerly offers her power to help you sate it and damn yourself. You accept the offer and it's all done in a moment. All the doubts are gone, you eagerly put your mask in place and your conscience is brushed aside and buried deep below the surface of your mind. There is no more wretched agony over what you've done and its fading echoes merely serve to stoke the fires of vengeance burning within your chest. When you reach the platform, the heart of the dark side itself manifests around you in a sphere of sickly pulsating malevolent darkness. The mere backslash of your arrival throws Lash's broken body clear off the platform to tumble to her doom kilometers below and you don't even spare her a second thought. She doesn't matter any longer. The falling skies are irrelevant. Parian is here, yours to kill, and that single thought made all the restraint you ever had snap. When you look at him, your eyes are pools of molten corrupted gold glowing so bright that made your visor shine. You level a hand at Parian, who finally turns to face you and the dark side jumps to obey your will. Tendrils made of its raw power manifest themselves around you and lash at the bastard Jedi. A small voice in the back of your head whispers that this is wrong, that you're becoming everything that you loathe. That you're finally falling and don't even care. You dismiss it. It doesn't matter. The dark side is with you, Parian is in front of you and you're going to make him pay for an eternity.